Welcome back to the Crash the Pond podcast. It is a post-trade deadline edition of Crash the Pond. Lots to discuss, lots to talk about.
Yep.
But first, before we do that, welcome home.
You brought it back.
Welcome home, everyone.
I'm happy you said it because I completely forgot about the bit.
Good.
Not going to lie.
Well, last week you reminded me. This week I remind you. So
yeah,
the bit will never die.
It will never die. People are in the Crash the Pond house. They need to take their shoes off, sit on the couch, get ready to have a nice little story time. Maybe curl up next to the fire, get a warm blanket. It's still cold out. It's not summer. It's not spring yet where you can kind of lay and take advantage of the cool breeze. You need that warmth still.
Yeah, it is still a little bit chilly. But one thing I did want to give a shout out to before we begin talking about the trade deadline and Pat Verbeek and all of that is that today marks not quite exactly, but pretty much 4-year anniversary of the Crash the Pond podcast. So the last time we did a non-Crash the Pond podcast back in our old Anaheim calling days, it would have been March 12th of 2020. Very fateful day, but also that's how long we've been doing this, just this portion of our podcasting journey. So to everyone that's stuck with us since then, who's joined in more recently, who's been here since day one with Anaheim Calling, shout out to all of you. We really do appreciate you.
Yes, 100%. 4 years. For whatever reason, we decided to go and start our own thing in the middle of there being no games, which was hindsight, maybe not a great decision.
There were games.
When we first broke off, no, the season was canceled.
I mean, last I checked, we did a podcast about Game 5 of the 2007 Western Conference Final. So
yep,
that counts.
Yeah, there you go. That's what we did. That's what we were doing back then when we started Crash the Pond. So somehow, some way, we are still here today, still providing you this type of content where 4 years later, we are still talking about the Ducks trade deadline. And I can imagine that we are probably much happier about the trade deadline than we were probably 4 years ago.
Yeah, if you just think about the last 4 years, like you and I have changed residences, we've changed, like the Ducks have changed coaches, GMs, players.
I have a child now.
You have a kid now. Like,
yeah,
a lot can happen in 4 years. Although weirdly, it feels like it's gone by pretty quick. So I don't know. Anyway, enough with the reminiscing. No one wants to hear all that. Let's talk about the trade deadline. So for those of you who are subscribed to us on YouTube, you've probably already seen our little recap stream, which has been up for a while now. But to really jump into it right away, the biggest trade of the deadline for the Ducks was Ilya Lyubushkin to Toronto. No, just kidding.
We already talked about that last week also.
Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick traded to the Edmonton Oilers, both of them with full salary retention at 50%. For a 2024 first-round pick and a 2025 conditional fifth-round pick. And the conditions on the fifth-round pick are that it becomes a fourth if the Oilers win the Stanley Cup. So there you go. Your thoughts?
This was a good trade. I think if I'm giving my simple thoughts, the Ducks ended up getting a first-round pick. Pat Verbeek kind of talked about it, and we'll get into his comments a bit more in the future. But he had targeted a first-round pick after Monahan had set that price as getting a first-rounder. And I think maybe due to the cap hit, that probably made it a little bit more difficult to get a first-round pick for Adam Henrique on its own. Because at 50% retained, you were just never going to get the cap hit down to exactly where Monahan was at. So that's why probably having to throw in Sam Carrick is what was needed to help get a first-round pick. And you got the additional pick just for the added value of having Carrick within there. So I think it's a really good deal. The Ducks jumped on the market. They were one of the few teams to get a first-round pick out of this. And I think that definitely needs to be commended, or Pat Verbeek deserves praise for getting this type of return for two pending UFAs.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you and I had talked about Adam Henrique kind of in that Sean Monahan mold of getting a first-round pick, maybe an additional pick for salary retention. And I think that when you boil down this trade, I don't think it's quite full value first-round pick just for Adam Henrique. It's kind of like Adam Henrique plus the retention, plus Sam Carrick, plus the retention. So it's not really a first-round pick just for Adam Henrique. But at the end of the day, net result is the Ducks have an additional first-round pick, 2 in the first round. and maybe they get a 4th round pick if the Oilers win the Stanley Cup. So it's a tidy bit of work by Pat Verbeek, I would say.
Yep. Because I think Sam Carrick on his own probably gets you more than a conditional 5th, right? He probably gets you closer to maybe a 3rd.
Ugh,
Maybe.
So I don't think so.
But with that, but like I think you can make that argument, or maybe it's a conditional 4th then instead.
Yeah.
But still, Sam Carrick has more value than that conditional 5th round pick, which is why the combination of the two together is what got them there. And I think the only bit of like hand wringing I think I saw about this deal was the fact that Pat Verbeek also had to retain on Sam Carrick, and that used up the 2nd and 3rd retention slot. The 2nd retention slot was Henrique, 3rd was Carrick, the 1st was Lagesson, which limited the Ducks' ability to do any sort of retention until July 1. But I think if this is what was needed to get the deal done, then you do it. And I would imagine that's where this ended up at. Edmonton is tight to the cap. They probably could not have made it work with adding Sam Carrick at his full cap hit. So the Ducks had to do full retention to get this deal done. And this was a good return. And so you do what you need to do to get the deal done. And I would praise Pat Verbeek for doing that.
Yeah, I think ultimately getting the 1st round pick, maybe that 1st round pick could have been split up into like a 2nd and a 3rd. Maybe you could have gotten more picks in total. But when you think about the potential trade value of these picks that you're receiving, because where the Ducks are at right now, they're not really in teardown mode where you're using your picks later in the 1st round to draft guys who are going to be on the roster in 3 to 4 years. You're potentially thinking about trading those picks to go and acquire proven talent. Getting that 1st round pick just has a lot more trade value for that. And so I think maybe you get less around it, but the 1st round pick is kind of like the crown jewel of it all.
Yep. It's just a better asset. It's a better asset, like you said, to go and move a guy, or if you draft someone, you have a better asset there. And sure, it's probably going to be a late 1st round pick, but that's better than a late 2nd round pick. And so all in all, really good deal.
Yeah, I'm happy with it. I think that the Ducks got just about everything that they could from Adam Henrique, and now we wish Adam Henrique and Sam Carrick well. I mean,
yes.
Talking about the podcast history, one of the first episodes we ever did was the original Adam Henrique trade to from New Jersey for Sammy Vatanen. So now to see him go play for a cup contender, that's going to help his value to try to get his next contract. Same for Sam Carrick. So I feel like everybody wins in this situation.
Well, and I think something else is Adam Henrique, I think, had made the comment that the Ducks kind of had kept him informed the entire step of the way. I think that's going to go a long way for Pat Verbeek, who is a new general manager, and his reputation with players on the free agent market. And I think doing this type of deal where you're sending a player to a premier destination also makes Verbeek look good from that perspective. And so I think from the perspective of getting assets back, it's a great move for Verbeek. And I think also just from almost like a PR perspective, because I think there's been this reputation that's gone around, whether it's earned or unearned. I would say it's probably earned, of him being a harsh negotiator and all those different things, and maybe not the most fun person to deal with in negotiations as an RFA. I think this might win you some points with players, though, especially if they're UFAs. The fact that you're going to do right by them if the situation calls for it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that it feels like more than ever in the NHL, we hear about how GMs really try to manage their reputation with players and keep players in the loop. And players and agents have more power, I think, now than they used to. And I think Pat Verbeek is smartly kind of staying in tune with that, although different circumstance than the RFAs.
Yep.
Moving on, though, the Ducks then traded a 5th round pick, their own 5th round pick, to Colorado for Ben Meyers. So I did not see this one coming.
Nope.
You did not see this one coming. I'm going to be pretty confident in saying that. For Ben Meyers, I think an undrafted player, 25 years old, going to be 26 in November, a depth player in Colorado that never fully found his footing there. Like his career high games played in Colorado's 39 games, but who's had a good run in the AHL, who had a good run late in his college career, who has played for Greg Cronin. So Greg Cronin's intimately familiar with him. Profiles as kind of a bottom 6 energy, skating, maybe some playmaking type. I actually really like this trade for the Ducks.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it with another trade coming up, and kind of with some of the comments from Pat Verbeek. But this Ducks kind of top end is kind of set, it almost feels like at this point in time. And so really what you need to do at this point for Verbeek is really find the fourth liners, the third liners for this team and who's going to be here long term. And so going out and getting a Ben Meyers and at least seeing what he can do with Greg Cronin, because he came out of college after the 21-22 season and played 5 games for the Avs, it looks like. And then last year was his first full pro year and played most of the season, or 30 games in the AHL. So Cronin was probably his first pro coach. And so there is going to be familiarity there and someone that coached him to become a pro and play in both the AHL and NHL. And so I think that this is, maybe it's wasteful, some people might say, to give a 5th round pick, but I think Verbeek is using kind of his assets in the future. And he mentioned this, I think, on today or Saturday when he did the migration event or whatever it was called. Pancake breakfast is what I'll call it. That a 5th round pick, if they do end up making the NHL, is not going to be there for 5-6 years, I think is what he was saying from his projection. So by giving this up and getting Ben Meyers, you're getting someone who will help you a bit more now and can potentially be something. The one thing that's kind of worth mentioning about Ben Meyers is he's actually a UFA this summer. So he is a Group 6 UFA because, and essentially that group status is based upon NHL games played. So if he would have played enough NHL games, he would have been an RFA, but this is something built into the CBA for guys that aren't getting their look in the NHL after a certain amount of time. So it's going to be interesting to see if he ends up extending. I would imagine Verbeek tries to extend him if he went out and traded for him. But I like the idea. I like what I've seen from him so far. You can definitely kind of see he has that energy, a little bit of a north-south game that can get in on the forecheck and kind of play the type of game I think Verbeek wants the lower tier players to play.
Yeah, it does. I think it does feel like the Ducks are going to try to re-sign him. I mean, spending a draft pick to then just let the guy walk seems a little like bad asset management.
Yeah.
And yes, it's just a 5th round pick, but it's still trade capital. And yeah, we've already gotten to see a couple of games now from Meyers, and the way I kind of view him is just like a better version of what the Ducks kind of already have in their bottom 6. Like he's actually got some decent speed. You know, he's faster than guys like Lundestrom, Jones. He's also maybe a little stronger, just a little smarter. And we'll talk about it more and more, but that seems to be what Verbeek really, really is after on this team, is guys who can just kind of play that, we'll call it gritty, two-way, smart brand of hockey. And Ben Meyers is that because, like you said, the top guys are there. The Ducks' top 6 kind of star rotation is already built into the equation. So now you got to go out and find those guys to supplement them. And Ben Meyers is going to help them do that.
He kind of reminds me, and maybe it's just fully because of the number, but he reminds me of Sam Carrick when he was at his best a couple of years ago, when he was a really good defensive forward, kind of solid enough in the offensive zone, but really kind of made his bones by being a defensively responsible winger and could get up and really get in on the forecheck when needed. And so maybe it's just confirmation bias with the number, and that's making me think about it. But he reminds me of Sam Carrick a couple of years ago, basically.
Okay. Yeah. Apologies to everyone if I'm having connection issues. Don't really know what's going on, but hopefully the audio will come out fine.
Yeah, the audio seems fine. You're just camera freezing a little bit.
Camera freezing? Okay, that's fine.
Part of it, I was going to mention it, but could not tell if it was my end or yours. So
okay. Well, as long as it's just the visual, then people can just stare at my face for a few seconds.
Yep.
That's fine. Okay, well, anything else in the Ben Meyers trade?
No, I think it's a little bit of a stab in the dark, but it's one that I think we'll get to it a bit, but it seems like Verbeek is going to kind of do an overhaul of the bottom 6, 4th line, and I feel like going out and getting a Ben Meyers is kind of part of that.
Yep, I would agree with that. It just kind of fits the culture and everything that they're trying to establish in that bottom 6. Not a trade here, but the Ducks did make a waiver claim on deadline day.
Yep.
William Lagesson. So another defenseman, a left shot D, a guy who was playing in Toronto, kind of up and down the last few years, AHL, NHL, some decent defensive numbers. Verbeek described him as a purely defensive defenseman. He's also, I think, a UFA. Yeah. And so they're not 100% sure if they're going to keep him. They're going to get a look at him and see where to go from there. But now the Ducks have more depth. They also don't have to stretch the goals quite as thin with some of the injuries going on down there. But I don't know if I have a whole lot to say about this one because it feels like just a bit of a depth move.
Yeah, it's 100% a depth move. I think a lot of people at the time of the waiver claim were curious or nervous, all the different gambit of emotions about what this would mean for one Olen Zellweger and what it would mean for him down the stretch, because it felt like this might pinch him out of the lineup. But the one thing to keep in mind with this situation as you get past the deadline is there's no longer a 23-man roster limit. You're able to exceed that and go as high as you want. And so with this waiver claim, Zellweger was put on waiver, or not put on waivers, sent down on a paper transaction so that they could probably be at the 23-man roster as of the deadline, and then called back up soon after once the roster limits are no longer applicable. So just feels like a depth move. The Ducks now have 8 defensemen. They don't have to call anyone up from San Diego if someone gets hurt. 2 different defensemen can be hurt and it will be fine.
Yeah, and he's got some decent puck moving ability. He's a guy who's played well in the AHL in the brief stints that I've seen of him. So
I mean, he has good defensive metrics this season. You mentioned that, but I think it'd be interesting to see him draw into a game. And also, I think Derek, our good friend Derek Lee at the Hockey News had reported this, that I guess in the for the Toronto, he had actually been playing a decent amount of the right side, even though he's a left-hand shot. So I'm curious if we'll see him jump into some games for Lindstrom, or instead of Lindstrom down the stretch, and see what he can do.
It basically seems like if you're going to play as a lefty for the Ducks, you have to accept the fact that you're probably going to end up playing on the right side at some point.
Yeah. So I think he'll get a look. I mean, maybe Vakanainen comes out for a game and he gets a look there. It feels like the final however many games are left are going to be very much like a tryout situation for the Ducks to see who they have currently and what they can do, because I mean, Vakanainen's an RFA. Lindstrom, I think, is an RFA also. Lagesson's now a UFA. Like, there are guys that are fighting for roster spots right now and fighting for contracts.
I would agree with that. Moving forward, a guy who was kind of fighting for a job, but that has now moved on, is Jacob Perreault. So the Ducks traded Perreault for Jan Mehc to the Canadiens. And one thing that's interesting to me, this is like not really about the trade itself, but that the night before the trade, Perreault was healthy scratched in San Diego, and it's not like the goals were going 11 forward 7D. They were going, I think, 11 forward 60 or something like that. They were playing shorthanded.
Okay.
And so at first I thought, man, is Jacob Perreault just that far into the doghouse that like Matt McIlvaine is willing to play down a player? But as it turns out, it was probably to get him on over to Canada, and I don't think either of them have played yet, probably for visa issues. But Jan Mehc, he was a former second round pick for the Canadiens. Definitely more in that Ben Meyers mold that we were just talking about. Verbeek talked about him as a hard worker, can fit into the bottom 6, a work ethic type guy.
Always in the gym.
What's funny is that he was kind of like an analytical darling in his draft year in Byron Bader's model for like his production. Yeah. And so fell out of favor in the Canadian system. Jacob Perreault fell out of favor in the Ducks system. And I like the trade for both teams because I feel like it gets the Ducks more of the profile that they need right now.
Yeah, and I actually saw that, I think it was Andrew Berkshire had quote tweeted or retweeted something where basically like for the Canadians, they have so many kind of bottom 6 type players. Like that is kind of what their prospect system, what it's filled with. And what they're really missing is some of the more high upside players that can potentially hit their ceiling and become this top 6 player. And it's a little bit more risky. Whereas for the Ducks, it's kind of the opposite. They have a lot of kind of upside players. They have their top 6 basically set for your top 2 lines for the next 10 years, basically. Yeah. And so what the Ducks really need, and this is what we keep mentioning this, but Verbeek mentioned kind of the bottom 6 and reworking that. And going out and getting a Jan Mehc, which is something that the system doesn't have a whole lot of, which is a hard bottom 6 kind of all around type of player, is a really good move, because essentially, yes, you're moving the more high upside player for a more kind of floor type play, but that's what the Ducks need right now. They need to find those guys that will be your floor type player that could really thrive in your bottom 6, that can push play. I mean, you think about maybe like an Andre Kasha when he was at his best, right? I don't know if Mehc fits that. I haven't really watched him enough, but that's kind of what I think of a bit, I think, when I hear of Jan Mehc's game.
And also just when you think about Jacob Perreault with the Ducks, to me, it's still a real shame because I think he still has a lot of talent. But
super high skilled.
But if you look at where he was going to be able to fit in, and like we've been hammering here for the last 20 minutes, like the Ducks top 6 is basically set for the next decade as long as no crazy trades happen.
Yeah.
And so Jacob Perreault is not really a guy who realistically is going to be a kind of third line, fourth line player. If he's going to make the NHL, maybe it's in a third line role, but it's like in a scoring kind of offensive type role. And it just doesn't seem like the Ducks were going to be able to get him that. They probably also weren't super thrilled with how his season was going. So I'm happy for him. He gets a fresh start in an organization that's going to do everything to kind of get him to where they think he can be. And then Mehc comes in to a better situation as well.
Yeah, and I also think it sucks, but he's like a victim of the situation, I think, with the Ducks, with the fact that he's had a different head coach for the Gulls every single season.
Yes.
The fact that he was drafted in, what would that have been, the 2020 draft, and there was no OHL that year, so that forced him as an 18-year-old into the AHL right away, and then because of the rules, that allowed him to stay in the AHL, so he's kind of this one-off weird situation where his last year of playing junior was his draft year, which was cut short also, mind you. So like this is someone that's kind of been put into very unique, very non-traditional ways of development, and it seems like it hasn't necessarily been the best for him. And so I think just a fresh start where there's no priors, no reputation, no nothing, I think can be good for him.
I would agree with that, and that's the thing is that the Gulls have been such a disaster the last few years, changing coaches and everything, like you touched on, that I feel bad for just that entire kind of generation of Ducks prospects that just have kind of gotten stuck in limbo a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is just Pat Verbeek basically reworking that. So,
but
good for everybody involved. Now, you are obligated to give this trade deadline a letter grade.
So my letter grade for this, and maybe this is too critical, and I think you're on the same page as me with this though, I would probably say I'll go a little higher than I initially thought last week. Last week I was at a B. I think having looked at it and talking about all this, I think I would go B+. I think if we considered, and maybe this is some added context, if we added in the Gauthier for Drysdale trade to this, then this becomes an A for me. That's too far back, in my opinion, to necessarily consider it part of the trade deadline. But where I'm getting at with this is I think this was a very good deadline for this Ducks team. I think Pat Verbeek did exactly what he needed to do in moving Adam Henrique and getting a very good return for Adam Henrique. He also made some on-the-fringes moves that could be interesting, but there was no home run swing. There was no taking your stance on moving Frank Vetrano, whether that was as a result of him, whether that was as a result of people not meeting his price and not making it worth his while, because you can only control kind of putting him up there. You can't control what offers you're going to get in return. There just wasn't that type of kind of wow, knock your socks off deal. But I think every deal that he made was a good deal and got a very good return. And so maybe you could say, well, that deserves an A. I think the A is like above and beyond, where it's this home run swing that is this fantastic trade that really, really takes things to another level. I don't think that occurred during this deadline for Verbeek. I don't necessarily think that's his fault. But I think with that being the case, I'd give it a B+.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely gets a good score for getting a first-round pick for Adam Henrique when that may not have been a guarantee. And like we said, it's not a clean one-for-one. I mean, the Oilers were paying as much for their retention as they were for Adam Henrique.
Yeah.
But I will give him a B. I think he did everything that he needed to do. He got the return that we expected. He took some interesting gambles, some interesting kind of long-term plays, like with the Mehc trade, Ben Meyers, even Lagesson could be somewhat intriguing. But like you said, nothing that was super high upside, like no big Frank Vetrano deal. And I'm not using that to take away from him. It's just that would have been something that would have increased the score for me. And so, and also, I mean, we should mention getting, what was it, a third-round pick for Eli Lyubushkin? Considering how Eli Lyubushkin was playing and just his relative just lack of any long-term value to the Ducks, getting a third-round pick is actually pretty good. Yeah. So yeah, B to me is like a perfectly fair grade. A is just kind of like would be exceeding expectation. I think he did exactly what I expected with maybe just a little bit more, and I'm comfortable with the B.
Yeah, and Duck Dragonet points out he doesn't think Verbeek was actually shopping for Toronto. I don't think he was either, but I think he was still listening when anyone would call on him.
And
I don't think he was out there
definitely
shopping.
calling.
Yeah, and he set a price and no one met it, which we don't know what that price is, so we can't really talk on it one way or the other.
Well, the other thing I wanted to touch on regarding Vetrano is that the more that time went on, the more I think that I'm more sympathetic to the idea of keeping Frank Vetrano because, yes, you have your price. Maybe it'll be the most you can ever get for him, although who knows with what teams are willing to pay. But also, Pat Verbeek and the Ducks, they aim to push for the playoffs next season. Mm-hmm. We expect them to push for the playoffs next season. And by that time, Frank Vetrano is going to be a guy that will actually help them. That is going to be a guy that would fill a role and on a third or second line that they would be looking to fill at that point if they were to trade him.
And so I think Verbeek's comments, and we're about to get into those, but I think Verbeek's comments really put this in a bit of a different light. And I know I maybe was more gung-ho than you were. I think we were both on board that he should be traded because his value will never be higher. And I still stand by that. The issue with that is that requires someone meeting that value determination. And if no one's going to meet that value determination, then it's not worth your while to do it. And you're better off keeping him in that situation where if they're in this situation again next year, he's still going to have a lot of value at the deadline. So
and you can still trade him next season if things go south. Like, it's not like it's a total sunk cost. There's still an opportunity to trade him. So that's why I think it's not at all a mistake or a disaster not to trade him.
Correct. Agreed. I would agree.
So I think it's just not something that I'm looking at as like a big negative from the trade deadline.
Yeah. So before we get into Pat Verbeek's comments, though, I think we should have a bit of a word from our sponsor. So top of the morning to you. This episode is brought to you by the St. Patrick's Day Shamrock Shavers Manscaped. This year, don't just chase rainbows, make your own pot of gold and groom your little leprechaun with the leaders in the below-the-kilt care. Say goodbye to your clover forest with Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 and let your confidence shine bright. Embrace the luck of the Irish and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped. Head over to manscaped.com and use code CTP for 20% off plus free shipping. Ever since I've used Manscaped, I can proudly say I found my pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Meet your new lucky charm for St. Patrick's Day, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. The trimmer comes with 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, one for a classic trim, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. Equipped with dual LED spotlights, navigate your shamrock patch in peace. Worried you'll make a mess? Fear not. This wonder is waterproof. Shave by the misty moors, under a waterfall, or even during a rain dance. Its compact case makes it an ideal companion, ready for an adventure or last-minute plans. Trimming the hedges in your Irish garden isn't just for below the belt. Complete your look with Manscaped's signature Beard Hedger Pro Kit and Handyman Electric Face Shaver. Whether you're sculpting your beard or cleaning up your neckline, they are always the right tool for the job. So you can get 20% off and free shipping with the code CTP at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with code CTP at manscaped.com. This St. Patrick's Day, make sure your little hairy leprechaun is luckier than ever with Manscaped.
My God. That might have been the most aggressive line I think I've heard from those before.
Yeah. Salem wanted to get on the ad read a little bit there.
Okay. Well, we move forward. So we got really lucky this last weekend because Pat Verbeek came out of his ivory tower and talked up a storm.
Multiple locations.
On the Beaker podcast, on the, he did an actual media availability, and then he talked at the migration event, which was just kind of a funny thing to name a fan event.
I like it, actually. It's better than calling it a pancake breakfast.
Where are they migrating to?
The Ducks migrate.
But where are you migrating? Are the Ducks moving to San Diego?
Ducks migrate in winter and in whenever it is. It works. It works with the mascot.
It's fine. But yeah. Pat Verbeek gave an extensive interview to Brian Hayward at the migration event / honorary pancake breakfast. I'm still going to call it that because it's just funny to me.
Yeah.
I think so. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like his comments at the pancake breakfast were the most extensive and also kind of encapsulated everything else he had said prior.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So that's why I didn't really look back to all the other comments, because I felt like the long interview he did with Brian Hayward, who, by the way, Brian Hayward, great interviewer.
Correct. And I was going to say there is one thing that he mentioned in the Duck
disagree
stream
with his takes, but his actual questions, and I mean, he asked him on the Beaker, like, are you thinking about trading guys like Fowler?
Yep.
I mean, I don't think any actual media members asked Pat Verbeek that. So
no, but that was the only question I think in that Duck stream interview on the Beaker that he was not asked a similar question during the migration event, was the one about Fowler, Gibson, and Vetrano.
Well, he gave a non-answer.
He gave a non-answer that we're always listening, but
when Gretzky was traded, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, exactly. But
so we're just going to go through his different comments and kind of just hit on each one, give our quick thoughts. But basically, Pat Verbeek said that the Ducks, he does not want them to be a seller anymore next year. He said that the rebuild is where you tear it down. Now they're in a place where they need to take a step. The goal is to push next year for a playoff race. He just doesn't see this team as a seller anymore. Moving forward, those selling type contracts are gone. The team is basically here, minus whatever additions they make this summer. But what do you make of that?
I think it's pretty spot on. I mean, you look at this roster going into next season, and there's probably only one player you can make the argument that is like a contract that you would want to sell, potentially, and that's Frank Vetrano. But I think more or less what he's getting at is what we've talked about a bunch on the show, and I think the nice thing about hearing this is it kind of reinforces everything we've talked about, which is that you are bad and you kind of tear everything down. You do all that to get these high draft picks and build your team around, get your core players. And looking at this Ducks team, right? 5 of their 6 players currently, or 5 of their top 6 probably for next season, are going to be guys that were drafted by the organization. 4 of them at 23 and under, with Zegras, Gauthier, McTavish, Carlson, Terry being the older of that group at the 5th. And if they go out, and we'll get to that, if they go out and get another top 6 player, there's your top 6. If they end up drafting first overall, get Macklin Celebrini, there's your top 6. So you have your entire top 6 core right there. And then from the defense perspective, you've got Minchikov, you've got Lacombe, you've got Zellweger, you've got Luneau, you've got all of these guys, and you've got the supplementary pieces in a Radko Gudas, potentially in Ian Moore. We'll get there also at some point. Like, you have all of these pieces. And so what more good, I guess, can you do from being bad, right? The whole purpose of being bad is accumulate as many draft picks as possible. You can then either trade those for someone, or you can draft with them and have those players join your roster. The high-end players on this Ducks team, which is what you want to get from the draft, are all on this team. They're gonna, like, Gauthier will be on the team this year. They're all gonna be here. So what is the purpose of being a bad team next season?
Yeah, it's time to take that next step. And
he
talked a lot about all the 1-goal games and the 1-goal game losses that the Ducks have. And yeah, it's basically that time to now you got to go learn how to win games and win games consistently and win difficult games. And I don't think that he means to say, and I don't think anyone expects the Ducks to make the playoffs next season.
No.
But they have to be in a point where they're not basically out of it by January.
There has to be progress next season. There has to be progress where they're in the race at the end. Kind of like, I think, what you and I were hoping for coming into this season, of being in the 80-ish point range, being there. This season, I think injuries derailed things. New head coach, where, I mean, Verbeek kind of had this comment where they're drinking from a fire hose this season, with really having to take on
the culture comment.
Yes, so, and have everything redone there. And I know we'll get there also. But so I think that what our expectation was for this season is, I think, what next season should be.
Yeah, I mean, he made it sound like on the culture bit that it's been a difficult transition from this past era of Dallas Eakins now to Greg Cronin, and trying to build that culture of accountability, competitiveness. He talks a lot about strength and off-ice training, and that kind of being the foundation of your culture.
Yeah.
Everyone being, some of it is platitudes, but I do kind of take him at his word that he believes in that. I do just find it interesting, the culture shock factor that he talked about with Greg Cronin, because the Ducks are now well into the season. Like the Greg Cronin experience isn't really anything new.
Yeah.
And so just kind of some interesting notes there. I think the biggest takeaway for me, though, in this whole shebang, this whole pancake breakfast, was that he really harped on the bottom six being an area that he needed to address. Wants more speed in there, wants more production, wants to improve that. He really said that where the Ducks are failing is their production in their bottom six. Like the lack of production from the bottom six is basically the difference in these one-goal games. And he was pretty explicit about that. So it's pretty clear that that's something that's going to be addressed. And we've talked about that a bunch on this podcast.
Yeah, and here's the thing. That's something that he mentioned in every interview he did.
Yes.
This was not just at the migration event thing, the pancake breakfast. This was on the Bally broadcasts on the Friday night game. He specifically mentioned this talking point with Hayward and Allers. In the Beaker podcast, mentioned this exact point with Hayward and Allers. This is a very front of mind topic for Pat Verbeek and something he is going to address. And if this is like, if you think about this Ducks forward group right now, right? I think the bottom six, I mean, we should probably, do you want to jump into this element of kind of what's going to happen with the bottom six?
You can blend it with the fact that he was asked about all the RFAs. So like Jones, Lundestrom, that crew. And he was kind of non-committal. I mean, he basically said that we have 20 games to evaluate these guys and then get together with the pro scouts by season's end and figure out who's going to stay, who's going to make sense financially.
Yep.
So really, when you put it all together, it feels like change is coming for the bottom six.
Yep. I would say anyone in the bottom six after hearing those comments probably should not feel safe in their job. At this point in time, with that comment, with looking everything, I am not necessarily expecting really any of the guys that were signed or any of the guys that are RFAs to get qualifying offers. I don't think Lundestrom does with these comments. And if you're looking at just pure production, like I don't think Bo Gru does. I mean, Brett Leeson at this point, I don't think does. Like, I think realistically, you look at this team, right? And going into next season, you look at this team, they have the top six pretty much set, right? They're probably going to add a top six right wing, which pushes the third line to essentially being Vetrano, Strome, and Alex Killorn. So there are basically 3 spots left for this team. And so I don't necessarily see it if he's being critical of all these guys and saying they need more production from their bottom six. I don't see any of them necessarily being in that mix for one of those 3 spots. I think Ben Meyers could potentially be because he just traded for him.
Yeah.
But I think the big thing is he's going to rework that entire fourth line basically to be exactly what he wants.
Well, like Lundestrom's qualifying offer is $1.8 million, and like for what he is, like, do you really want to pay that for what's probably going to be a fourth liner who doesn't really bring much? And so I think that TBD, like these guys could play really well, and he has said that they will evaluate. So we don't want to treat it like a foregone conclusion, but it does feel like there's a pretty strong momentum towards that being overhauled this summer, and rightfully so. Yeah, we've talked about it all season. So
yep. Yeah, and I think that his point's fascinating though when he talked about this, because one of the things he mentioned was that sure, there are the high end teams that have the high end scores and they're the ones driving it, but you look at some teams and their top six or they get the depth scoring. That's really what makes them great. And he's like, you look at the top six for our teams versus their teams, and we're getting about the same production as them from our top six. And where we're really struggling is with production from the bottom six. And I think that thought is fascinating. I think you can also be critical of Verbeek in the same thought process because he is the one that claimed Ross Johnston, who has 3 points over this time period, over his entire time period as a Duck. And so if you're going to be critical of production from the bottom six, there's one front and center that was a waiver claim by him that has 2 more years left. So basically, I just think that entire fourth line is going to be completely reworked. Not really going to be a whole lot of people left, I think, from the current RFA group on this team.
Yep. He talked about being open to trading the second first round pick. I mean, it was a little bit of a non-answer, but yeah, somewhat noteworthy that he at least entertained it, just because I think that if they were like 3 years ago, they're probably not trading a second first round pick. You're using that to build up your prospect base. And instead now, like that's at least part of the discussion.
Yep.
I guess now shifting into prospect world a little bit more, one thing that I thought was really interesting that he was asked about was...
Real quick before we get into the prospect world, we should probably touch on the fact that he had mentioned adding a veteran talent.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I forgot to see that.
Yep.
Yeah, so he said he would like to add a top 6 right winger, a right-hand shot. He said that they don't have enough of those. And I find that fascinating because, first off, I don't really think about handedness that much.
Mm-hmm.
I also don't think that being a righty on the right side is as big of a deal for forwards. I think, in fact, being on your off wing as a forward can have advantages. But I do find that fascinating. And what I find even more fascinating about it is that if you look at the free agent list that kind of fit this bill, like it's not really a great list. It's like Steven Stamkos. And by not great, I mean like guys who are going to be expensive, who are older, Stamkos, Reinhart. There's like Tyler Johnson.
Marchessault.
Yeah. And so I almost think that will be a guy brought in via trade more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think Sam Reinhart's the big fish. I think if you can get him, it'd be great because I think Patrick at the Hockey News has brought this up, but he's thrived and made Sasha Barkov better. And so you put him next to Leo Carlsson, who plays a similar game to a Sasha Barkov, and that's someone that he could thrive next to. The issue I have with bringing in a Sam Reinhart is the contract. Like that contract resets everything for your team and could be detrimental to a long-term cap build where you are building around your current your current core, and instead you now have this outside talent. I mean, it's almost like what's happened with the Leafs and John Tavares, right? And how that can potentially be limiting with how you're building your roster. And so that's the concern there. Marchessault, I think, is an interesting talent, but I think he more so would almost be like an Alex Killorn type, where he may not be as high end of a scorer, but could be a decent enough right shot winger for this team in the top 6. I mean, I think you were going to go there, but I think the person to target is actually an RFA, and that would be Marty Necas.
I also just don't see Marchessault leaving Vegas for some reason.
I think he leaves.
Especially in division.
I don't think that Vegas is going to re-sign him. I don't think they're going to have the cap space to bring him back.
Well, I think one thing we've learned about Vegas is don't assume anything.
Fair.
Because they will flip everything on its head.
They also are willing to cut bait when needed.
Regardless, I just wouldn't target Marchessault.
Fair enough.
Just doesn't really fit, I think, the bill. Martin Necas is way more interesting to me. And if you can somehow get a trade to get him out of Carolina, maybe that's when you trade Frank Vetrano. Like, who knows? But that would be very interesting because he's more of an age fit. He's just, I think, a more skilled player at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
That is someone that I would be very interested in. But it's one of those things that feels a little like aspirational. Like, I think Pat Verbeek wants to do this, but if you just look at the potential avenues, there's some options that could kind of lead you down a bad path, and there's other options that are going to take a lot of work. So I don't know where that's actually going to end up.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is going to be for the Hurricanes is, can they sign Marty Necas? Like, is that something that they can get done and fit underneath their salary cap?
Yeah. So for Reinhart, so this is from AFP Analytics, the Twitter profile and / company, I should say. Their contract projection is 8/10 for him.
Yeah,
10.2.
Makes sense.
That is literally a big pill to swallow for the Ducks.
Well, it's not so. I think the tough part isn't necessarily that cap hit, right? It's the term and it's what it does to all the other players.
He's 29. Yeah.
Like that's the tough part. Well, and if he signs with the Ducks, it wouldn't be 8 years. It would be 7 years, unless it's a sign and trade.
Yes, that is a good point. But regardless, it's just too much. It's just too much. I don't know.
Yep.
I don't know.
I would agree.
Maybe I'm being too harsh, but I don't really see that one.
Yeah. What do you think of Stamkos?
I mean, my thing with Stamkos is if you can get him on kind of like your riding into the sunset contract, which isn't too egregious in terms of term, I think he could be an interesting fit just because we know how great of a finisher he is. Some of his numbers are down this year, but like I think generally he's a guy who does make the team better. He also gives you a very clear role on the power play to kind of build around with that one-time threat. So I just like that because it's lower commitment than a Reinhart, but it's not a perfect fit either. There's concerns there too, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think probably Marty Necas is the clear person. You have to give up assets to get him instead of signing him for free off of free
But you
agency.
have assets now. So
The Ducks have plenty of assets. The fact that Carolina is probably going to be cap strapped where they may not be able to sign him to whatever new deal he wants because he's an RFA, I believe, with arbitration rights this summer.
yes, he does. Yeah.
So he has the leverage there. And Marty Necas, his age fits with this Ducks. He's basically the same age as Troy Terry. And so it gives the Ducks, I mean, if they were to get Marty Necas, right, they would then have, you could do a line of Zegras, Carlson, Terry, and then have Gauthier, McTavish, Necas.
Yeah. That would be very interesting.
Yeah. And there's also, as part of this conversation, if the Ducks win first overall, Macklin Celebrini is on the team. Right?
Yes.
No, but like
Yes.
that is a relevant like point to be had right now. Like there is the potential for the Ducks to win the lottery. It's maybe like 10%, but that also is a person that you would add as a top six player. Is he right-hand shot?
No, I think he's a lefty.
Oh, well, there goes that part of it. But still,
Yeah.
you're adding to your top six.
Yeah, he is a lefty. So moving down the list, though, because we'll have all summer to talk about that.
Yep.
One thing that was interesting is the Ducks, or was Pat Verbeek talking about the investment they've made in skating coaches on the team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having 2 to 3 instructors who work with the players, using like motion capture to study the players' stride. You know, he brought up an example in Tampa Bay where they figured out a specific problem with Braden Point's stride, like his ankle flexion. And basically he worked on that and became a tremendously better skater, and that like allowed his career to take off. And I just love to hear that, because one thing that we often hear about, or at least depending where you listen, is that there's no salary cap for stuff like that, for bringing in, you know, skills coaches, skating coaches, development staff. And so throw your resources at that, because there's no limit. And this is an area that the Ducks have been so deficient in before Pat Verbeek arrived. And I think it's just great news to hear that is something that they're actually investing in, and that those guys even go on the road with some players and like give them sessions there. So I just love to hear that personally.
Yeah, like I think back to the heyday of the Vancouver Canucks, right? I think Mike Gillis was always talking about how he would invest in anything he could, and they had like sleep consultants, all these things that were very nuanced, very new for sports, to be able to try to get as much edge as they could and have their players performing at their best. And this is exactly what you want to hear from the highest person in the Ducks organization from the hockey side of things, like having some belief in these kind of newer age type of situations, because I don't think the Ducks were in the situation where they had someone running the team prior to Pat Verbeek being here that would think about this, that would even think about looking at biomechanics. And the fact that I think the most important thing here is that it's not just that Verbeek knows about it, it's the fact that he's seen it be successful and create a high-end player in this league and can see the benefits of it. And that's something where you can go to an ownership group, right, and say, hey, this is what worked for Braden Point. Look at how good he is now. This is why we should be investing in this.
Well, that's the thing, because he's got to go to ownership and sell them on writing the check.
Yep.
And they have, and so good on everyone involved.
Yep.
Moving down the list, though, he had some comments about different players. So current Ducks players. I mean, the big news was that Olen Zellweger is here to stay.
Yep.
He is all done with the I-5 shuttle.
Yeah. And makes sense. He looks like he belongs in the NHL. I don't think there's much more for him to gain from playing in the AHL. One quick clarification point I want to point out on Zellweger. He has already burned his first year of his contract. There was Brian Hayward had pointed out that he had played 8 games, almost like he was trying to make the 9-game tryout a thing, and if he would be sent down to not have to burn the year of his contract. Olen Zellweger, with his age, this year counted as a year off his contract no matter what. There is no ELC slide available for him as a result of that. So didn't matter whether he was staying up or not. The end result would be the same contract-wise for him. But good news that he is staying up. I think that he is going to learn a lot over these last 20 games or so.
Yeah, and I just love the progression. You know, started off camp shaky, went down, came back, looked better, had a brief stint, went back down, purpose-driven. They had him on that offside, kind of a precursor to what the role he's playing now. And now he's back up, and now it's just, I mean, it's all systems go.
Well, and it feels like this is a trial run for what they want the top 4 to be next season. Fowler, Zellweger, Minchikov, Gudas.
It does feel like a bit of a beta, like let's just see how this works.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work well, he said Leo Carlsson will be back Thursday, should be back Thursday.
Yep. Has a concussion.
Said Trevor Zegras, he kind of was asked like, what's Trevor Zegras' role here when he gets back? And the only definitive thing was that he sees him as a winger for right now. So nothing really new on that front.
Nope, nothing new, and makes sense when you look at how this team is shaping up.
Prospects, another interesting note, Tristan Luneau. He said that he sees him probably stepping into the lineup next season and being a full-time NHL player.
Yeah,
which is very
fascinating. That is fascinating because I think there's a lot of discussion about should the Ducks go out and sign a right-hand shot D? Should they trade for one? What should they do there? If Tristan Luneau is in the lineup next year, you don't have a roster spot.
You really don't.
Because, I mean, we talked about it. If you have Fowler, Zellweger, Minchikov, Gudas, and then Lacombe and Vakanainen as your your 5th and 7th on the left side, and then Luneau on the right, there's your 7D.
Yeah. And I think it's just fascinating, this level of confidence, given how little hockey Tristan Luneau has played this season.
Yeah.
I mean, his season basically ended with the World Juniors that he didn't get to play in.
Yeah.
Like, he hasn't played hockey in this calendar year. So it feels a little, again,
lofty.
Aspirational. Maybe he will get a minor league tune-up, but that seems to be the plan. So
yep. Regardless, I think they're probably going to sign like a depth player that can play on the right side for them if needed. Maybe they bring back Lindstrom, Lagesson, just something like that, and you carry 8D for most of the season.
Yep.
Something along those lines. Or Luneau's in the AHL and they're playing, and then you kind of move things around.
Talked about Nathan Gaucher, saying he's probably a couple of years away. Still seems to like him as a player, but kind of what we expected. Like, he's still going to take a little time. Talked about Regenda, saying that he's taken a step, which I thought was kind of interesting. That he might have an opportunity.
The one thing I want to point out on Nathan Gaucher is that he's like one of the youngest players eligible to be in the AHL. So that's something to keep in mind with him this year. Is most players his draft year are still in junior. And because he's a November birthday, he's super old for that draft. But that makes him one of the youngest players eligible to be in the AHL.
Yeah, I think people are kind of disappointed by his season in the AHL, but like, it's pretty rare for guys to just kind of seamlessly hop from level to level. And I think especially with his game, there's just going to be a feeling out process. That's fine. I think that what Pat Verbeek is saying is pretty much spot on with him. Talked about Nikita Nestorenko having more of a pro game now. It almost sounds like both Regenda and Nestorenko's stock has gone up a little bit. And maybe they will be in that mix for the training camp battle next season. And then just 3 guys to talk about, all in college right now. Cutter Gauthier. I mean, it seems like Pat Verbeek is really, really high on Cutter Gauthier, but also does see that there's going to be some development that needs to happen. Sam Colangelo seems really high on him.
Yeah, that was the fascinating one to hear because, I mean, to be quite frank, I feel like he's been a bit of a forgotten man in this Ducks prospect pool for me with kind of how his college career has gone, him switching universities. And so I think to hear Pat Verbeek talk so highly about Sam Colangelo and how he's excited to get him signed and onto the team and how he's really revamped his game and changes how he plays, I think that's exciting to hear as a Ducks fan because I don't think I had really even thought about him being an option for this team long term, to be honest.
Yep, he has had a good season for Western Michigan. And then Ian Moore, I mean, it sounds like they just don't know what's going to happen with him. Like, in terms of if he's going to sign now or play another year of college. Because on the Beaker, he sounded dead set that he was going back to college. And then at the pancake luncheon, he was kind of waffling a little bit, not too sure. But seems really high on him. And to be quite honest, like right-hand D, we've talked about it. It's an area where the Ducks could use a little more depth. And if they can get Ian Moore signed, that would be pretty huge.
I mean, he's always been someone I'm high on because he seems almost like a Josh Manson type of player where, not from the physicality side of it, but Josh Manson, when he's at his best, is a really good first pass defenseman, makes really high skilled plays with the puck. When he struggled, it was him almost trying to be overly physical. And I think Ian Moore kind of seems like that same type of player where 6'4" right-hand shot defenseman, good hockey sense, able to make a really good first pass for a breakout. And so I think that that's something that's really valuable to have on your team. And so I think especially as a mix with having a Tristan Leno on the right side, and if Zellweger ends up on the right, Ian Moore kind of brings a little bit of a different element than those two. And so if he does indeed come out this year, I think that would be big for this Ducks team, because I think if he goes back for his senior year, I don't think that's a great sign for the Ducks signing him, or him signing with the Ducks.
I mean, I don't know if I'd go that far, because he's been injured this year. Like he's played in 19 games.
True.
And so part of it could just be like, I want to get a full season under my belt. And so I would understand that. He also hasn't had like a great season. You know, he's got 7 points in 19 games. He had 19 points in 34 games the year prior. So I could see it as a bit of like unfinished business for him.
Yeah.
It was also kind of a weird ride with all the COVID like schedule moving around in the beginning. So
so when he was drafted, he was actually drafted, I think, out of prep school, and then went to the USHL after that, and was, regardless of COVID, was going to do that, and then started in Harvard in his draft plus 2 season. So he's technically in his draft plus 4 right now. And the only reason why the Ducks retain his rights is because he's going to college, and you have a guy until they graduate from college. So I just really don't know in terms of what's going to happen there. I think it's potential, but I mean, this is a guy that was drafted in the 2020 draft. So we're coming up on the 2024-2025 season. Yeah. I get the unfinished business side of it, but I don't know how much more there is from a development side for a guy that is 22, going to be turning 23 during next season.
Why did Pat Verbeek say he's 6'4" when his Elite Prospects page said 6'2"? Did he grow 2 inches?
Well, it says he's 6'2", but if you look down in the draft guide, it says 6'3".
What? How tall is this man? Okay, his Harvard player page says 6'3".
Okay.
So did Pat Verbeek just add an inch?
He maybe added an inch.
Who's adding an inch here?
Freudian slip for him.
Does Pat Verbeek just see him as a 6'4" player?
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, I tend to agree with you. I think that if he doesn't come out, it might be a signal of like, maybe he wants to just go back to finish it out properly, and also might just not be sold on the whole Anaheim situation, kind of like with Henry Thrun, where he just doesn't see a spot for himself. But I would argue there's a spot for him.
Yeah.
It's that third right-hand shot spot, because you've got Luneau, you've got Gudas, and now like Ian Moore could just completely, complete that. So,
yep. And
I'm interested to see what happens there.
And the only other thing I want to note on the prospects you mentioned, it sounds like Cutter Gauthier is going to be in the NHL next year, and that makes sense when you deal with the fact of why he left the Flyers, or the assumed reason why he left the Flyers, that they had kind of reneged on the decision to sign him so that and not burn the first year, and kind of all the different type of stuff. I would imagine that kind of Pat Verbeek and Cutter Gauthier had conversations that once the season ends for Boston College, he's going to sign, and then we'll get a chance to be on the Ducks next season.
Yeah, I mean, I think what will likely happen is that he will be given kind of like the inside track to make the team out of training camp. Like, I could very well see the first day of training camp lines, him being on a line with like Leo Carlsson or something, or Mason McTavish, and then sink or swim from there. If he looks like he's going to need more time, no harm in some AHL development. Or, like, who knows? Maybe they'll do like a weird like Leo plan with him. It's just, we will see. We will see on that. But the starting point, the starting line to me is in Anaheim for him.
Yep, agreed.
Okay.
All right.
Wow.
Anything else?
We did everything in just under an hour. That is peak efficiency.
Yep. All right. Want to get to some questions?
Yes.
All right. So let's get some questions.
Let the people be heard.
So we're going to start with our Patreon exclusive Discord. So go to patreon.com/crashthepond. We're going to be starting with questions from in there. You can access to the Discord at the $2 tier or above. Nevada Maniac said, what are the odds that a current/former Duck has ever been in this Discord under a burner?
I would put that at like 0%.
I'd put it at like 0.1% because I'm not going to deal in an absolute, but it's very low. There's no way. That'd be great. That'd be hilarious. Well, I don't know if it'd be good or bad, to be honest, but
Yeah, I'm gonna go 0. Like, I can't imagine spending your own money when you're a Ducks player to go and do that.
To read about yourself.
But
Yeah.
there's players that will scroll, like that will name search on Twitter.
Yeah.
Speaking from personal experience.
Yeah.
So
You've been blocked by said players.
I've been blocked by players who I didn't even mention or anyway.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Shaken Wing said, "Who do we blame for bad line changes? It seems to be a constant for the Ducks."
I think at the end of the day, the players carry the burden there. You got to know when you're coming off. You got to know when you're going on. And sure, maybe coaches play a part in that, but it's on the it's one of the most basic things in hockey is changing lines, and if you can't do that, that's on the players.
Yep.
My 2 cents. My coach's bias.
B. Cutsman Cometh said, "Zegras?" Question mark.
Looks like he's getting close.
Yeah, I would probably say for the first game of the next homestand is what my gut feel is on it, with no actual information.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think that tracks with just everything that we're kind of seeing with him, being back skating and everything like that.
Yep. Shocking Duck said, "What's the best trade deadline move Pat Verbeek has made in his first 3 years?"
Oh, probably the Lindholm trade.
Yeah, probably Lindholm trade. I think this Henrique deal is up there with it, just in terms of getting good value back. But yeah, probably one of those two.
Fascinating.
I mean, what was it? Wasn't it the Raquel deal that the pick became Tristan Leno?
Yeah, but I don't like to judge it that way.
Fair.
Yeah.
Heyo Deflo said, "Will Jake finally give the Rangers their flowers?" I've said I want them to make the Cup final. Like, I'm rooting for the Rangers.
I think that you actually enjoy how the Rangers play. You just don't fully believe in their Cup contender.
Correct.
Bona fide.
Correct. Because I think that I think relying on power play and special teams is a very difficult recipe for success come playoff time. I think they're a fun team outside of certain players on their team that we will not speak of, and Jacob Trouba. That make them not my favorite ever, but they play a fun style. They're high offense, high octane, but I don't trust their 5-on-5 numbers well enough to go deep, but I will be rooting for them because, I mean, the Rangers and the Maple Leafs, all these teams going deep in the playoffs is good for hockey and good for the sport, or good for the NHL.
Yeah, I've definitely hopped on the Rangers bandwagon this season, probably because of our internal Devils-Rangers debate that's been just roaring.
Still Team Devils, but yeah.
Yeah, the Devils might be...
it's a sinking ship at this point.
Might be time to put a fork in them because...
I'm going down with the ship. Going down with the ship.
Hey, good on you.
Yeah. He also said, "Predict who will obtain the wild card spots in each conference."
Ooh, I feel like I've been on wild card watch.
Okay.
Is it time to start considering the Washington Capitals in the playoffs?
No.
Is it
it's
that
not.
time?
No.
They're back up to like 20% to make it.
They are... I'm just looking at kind of the point race. So they are currently 3 points out of the playoffs, and they have the same number of games played. The Flyers the Flyers actually have a bunch of have played more games than other teams. Okay, so wild card race. I'm gonna say Tampa gets one of them, and I'll go down with the sinking ship and be consistent and say the Devils get the other one.
Oh my God.
Going down with it.
Are you for real right now?
I'm going down with the sinking ship, Felix. Let me go down.
So as of this morning, the Devils had a 10% chance to make the playoffs.
Sometimes you just got to believe in it.
I will say that the final wildcard spots in the East will be the Lightning and the Flyers. So Red Wings are out. The Red Wings are like in free fall right now. And then in the West, Preds and Golden Knights. I mean, that seems pretty set in stone. I feel like the West is pretty much set.
I want Vegas to somehow not make it so badly.
I mean, it seems almost impossible just based on the probabilities here.
But you know what? For funsies, I'll say Minnesota makes it and Nashville makes it.
What did you make of Minnesota pulling their goalie in overtime?
Loved it.
I mean, they scored. So do the ends justify the means?
Well, it's because they were going up against Nashville.
Yeah.
So
it was definitely a balls to the wall type of move.
And getting that point, overtime wins don't matter as much because that's not the tiebreaker anymore. But still, getting the 2 points there as compared to going in a shootout, that was a gutsy move by John Hines, and I love it.
They are at a 16.8% chance to make the playoffs as of this morning. So
and Vegas not making it would be hilarious to me.
Vegas is at 83%. So
they're likely to, but we'll take some stands here. All right. Next question. Get Jones off the PP drum banger said, how do we feel about Verbeek's comments at the migration event?
Well, we just did an entire 30-something minutes on them. So
I think he was very candid and said the right things.
My general impression is that Pat Verbeek has a good feel for the pulse of where this team is going and what it needs. And I'm positive on it.
Yep.
Thumbs up.
Yep. I think that's the biggest thing is, and it feels like there's buy-in from management also. Or from ownership, which is important. Isaac said, for Felix, what NBA team would you compare the Ducks to at this moment in time? They kind of remind me of OKC personally.
Oh my God. I feel like my NBA knowledge isn't as great as it used to be, but OKC is a young, uprising team. They are very good this year, and the Ducks are not, but sure, let's go with OKC. Why not? Okay. The Ducks will be OKC next season.
And Ducks Juggernaut said, what positions do you target in FA this summer? One big splash signing or a few solid roster guys?
A few solid roster guys.
Yeah, I think forwards. Yes. We talked about it. Defense is kind of set. Goaltending set. Finding the depth forwards, and maybe you make a big splash with one winger.
Agreed.
Get Jones off the PP. Drunk Banger said, who stays and who goes? Leeson, Lundestrom, Jones, Silverberg, Grew, and Myers. I'll go Myers is the only person left.
I honestly think they're all gone, except for Meyers.
Yep, I agree. Danny Me said, how much money do you think we spend this offseason? Do you think we mildly spend this season or go more all in next year?
I don't see them signing like a big $10 million contract for a Sam Reinhart. I think it's going to be modest.
I also think from the perspective of, I think they're doing some long-term cap planning here. And so I think by going all in and spending to the cap will kind of really screw you over in the future. And so I think they're really trying to be cognizant of that. And she also said, what have you guys noticed with Lacombe? He seems to have a big problem out there. Why is has he not been sent down to maybe gain some confidence?
I think he's just adjusting to the NHL. It's just a bumpy up and down season. And he's not going down the HL now because he can't. But yeah, I think it's just more of growing pains.
Yep. Give 19 the C drum banger. Did Verbeek have any comments on Sidorov? No, I did not see any.
He did not.
He did not.
Which is
have
kind
any
of
comments.
Interesting because that's a guy you could kind of like tout that he's playing so well. But no.
Yep. And then I'm gonna hit a couple questions from Twitter. Then we'll get to Twitch and YouTube. So got this DM from Hockey South saying, we appreciate your continued coverage of the Ducks through thick and thin. Man, it's been thin for some number of years now. A top pairing right-hand D is the hardest thing to find in the NHL. Lots of options for the Ducks, but how do they find theirs? Luneau could be a 3-4, but likely not a 1-2.
Yeah, I think that this whole conversation is a little overblown because the Ducks are going to have Olen Zellweger and Pavel Mintyukov on the left side, patrolling the left side, or however you want to call it. They're going to be on the ice for 2/3 of the game, and then add in a Jackson Lacombe, and you don't really need like elite guys on each side. You just need guys that fit and supplement and complement those players. So sure, would it be nice to have a great player at every single spot? Yeah, but I think that's not necessarily as big of a need as it's being made out to be.
I also think Olen Zellweger is being deployed on the right side. And if Olen Zellweger could be a number one or number two defenseman.
Well, Fowler is going to be gone like within 2 years. So at some point he will, I think, return to his natural side.
Yep. Trevor Zegras said, hope all is well. 2 questions. I know you mentioned, and this is about me specifically, you're not a big fan of the idea of signing Stamkos. I just wanted to get your guys' opinion on why, because maybe it's something I haven't thought of. I think he'd be a good fit because he's right shot, top 6 scorer, great veteran, and scored. Also likely won't be long-term, which is perfect for the Ducks with all of their RFAs. I mean, my reason for it is if you look at some of the numbers and underlying metrics, it looks like he's falling off hard this season. He's still scoring goals. He still has that elite shot, but he is not a play driver. He is not the one doing that. Maybe you could say on the Ducks, he can do that same thing. He's not going to be relied upon for that. I would just be very cautious with kind of what we're seeing in the underlying numbers with giving Stamkos any sort of high cap hit, or term over maybe 2 or 3 years as a result of kind of what we're seeing with the aging curve that's happening with him.
Yep.
And they all said, if you had to take one at second overall, would you rather take Levshinov or Demidov?
Demidov. Give me that elite high upside forward talent.
I'm just nervous about him when he would come over, but probably Demidov. But
Levshinov's just not a lock by any means either. I think he's
agreed. But
like,
he's, I guess, more so that he's here already.
Sure, but I think the Demidov thing is actually way more certain than the Michkov was, because he's only got a year left on his KHL deal. So I'm actually feeling better about him. So
yeah. So Eric had sent me this DM and kind of mentioned about kind of top six right hand shot forwards and who are out there. But he mentioned, he's like, you probably will talk about that already. So lastly, if the Ducks land Celebrini, does that change anything with this conversation?
I mean, you probably aren't as, there's probably less of an impetus to go and get this additional player that we've been talking about in the top six.
Yep, agreed. All right, now we're going to hit YouTube and Twitch. So if you're watching on, or if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast services, you can find us at twitch.tv/crashthepond, where if you have Amazon Prime, you get one free Twitch Prime gaming sub each and every month, and it helps out more than you can imagine. You get special badges next to your name, special emotes in the chat, and you can be just like Ducks Jaggernaut, who resubbed. Thank you so much, Eric, for that. Or if you're listening to this, we have a YouTube account. We do our live stream there. Go to youtube.com/crashthepond and please subscribe to our channel. If you're watching this right now live on there, like the video. Liking the videos help out more than you can imagine. I'm going to steal a What Chaos bit, and this should be a like spike time. Spike those likes. Like spikes. Like spike. Get that going for us. Get those likes moving. All right, so we're going to get to our questions. Oh, this is one we have not hit yet. Alex Olvera said, question, any thoughts on Cronin's post-game presser? Some relatively harsh comments about players.
Good. It's time. The Ducks' first period against the New York Islanders, we've barely talked about the games, was embarrassing. The level of just undisciplined play, decision-making, the same old mistakes that just keep occurring. I am hard-pressed to believe that Greg Cronin has not addressed this internally an innumerable amount of times this season, different ways. And I think that he just reached a point where it's like, all right, I got to find another way. The public call out, it's not going to make the same waves in Anaheim as it is in, like, say, a Toronto. But I think he's just had it. And especially because you see these mistakes coming from veteran players who are supposed to be the leaders. We heard him talk about how after Adam Henrique was traded, or before that, he kind of brought in the leadership group into the locker room or wherever and told them, like, hey, you guys are going to have to step up and really keep this thing going. Well, they didn't do that against the Islanders, and I applaud him for it. Like, at a certain point, you can do all the coaching, you can do all the video, but when you keep playing like shit on the ice, it's on the players.
There was a game yesterday?
Yeah, there was.
There was?
Or was it 2 days ago?
I was too lost getting these guys.
Oh, you were at the game. Are you being okay? You're being sarcastic. I get it now.
Yeah. I feel like I was like I had a complete adrenaline rush after that, and don't remember anything after getting the shoes.
Okay.
So showed it for people. All right, some more questions. Let's see. Duck Jaggernaut said, "Do you consider Iserman over Demidov in any scenario?"
No.
Okay. Let's see. Vixler said, question, thoughts on Verbeek saying he wants Cutter to be developed into a power forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what everyone's expecting of him.
Yep. Jake M said, will this be Cronin's biggest test, keeping the young ones involved and invested while the veterans and some leadership gets moved out in a losing season?
Yeah, I think it is a test to keep everyone bought in as the season's kind of dwindling down and there's nothing left to play for in terms of the playoffs. But I feel like he shouldn't have to do that much work because, like we've talked about, there's jobs in the line. There's roster spots in the line. And so hopefully the players will kind of shape up a little bit.
Let's see. Ducks Jaggernaut said, assuming Newell Brown is out next season, where do the Ducks special teams units rank in the league for next season?
I mean, I think that they could be an above average power play.
Yep.
If they play their best players and just basically that's it, let them play. I think that they have that opportunity. Penalty kill, I have no clue.
Yep.
I honestly have no clue.
Austin
Not
said,
terrible.
should we root for the Kings to win round 1 against the Oilers if it stays that way so the Ducks draft pick ends up being lower?
Can you repeat the question?
Should Ducks fans root for the Kings to win in round 1 against the Oilers if it stays that way so the Ducks draft pick ends up being lower? So I'll jump in real quick on this.
Why would you want that?
Because the Ducks have the Oilers' first round pick.
Oh, sorry. I think you might have said it backwards, or I misunderstood. But
it's listed lower, which means lower number.
Oh, okay.
Lower
Well,
high,
yeah, the Ducks fans should be rooting for the Oilers in the playoffs. Yes.
No, he's saying not rooting against the Oilers.
No, you shouldn't do that. That doesn't make sense.
Well, the purpose of it, so the first round, it doesn't make sense because, so just for clarity for everyone out there, for the teams that don't make the conference final, they are seeded for the draft based upon their points. And conference or division winners end up being the lowest, and then everyone else is based on points. So Ducks fans should not be rooting for the Oilers to win the division. I think it is a clear thing, so that the draft pick ends up being closer or higher or lower, whichever way you want to put it. But the only way that they would be within 29, 30, 31, and 32 is if they make the conference final. So Oilers beating the Kings in the first round does nothing for that. The Oilers making the conference final would do that.
Got it.
So let's see. Elizabeth Leo said, do you realistically think Lacombe is with the Ducks long term? If you can, please discuss the reasons yes and reasons no.
I think yes. I think that he's a good player, and usually you want to keep those guys around. I don't know if he'll ever put up the biggest stats to kind of warrant a big contract. And so that would be the yes. I think the no would just be that there's going to be a point where there's just so many left-handed defensemen that maybe that's when you move him out. But I would try to keep him because I think he makes the team better.
Yeah, I would agree. Mohamed Zegras says, if not Celebrini, are you hoping for forward or right-hand shot defenseman?
I think that you are targeting a forward still. The Ducks have their blue line pretty much set. And so bring in another dynamic offensive talent. That makes a lot of sense to me.
Yep. Elizabeth Leo said, if Olen proves he can play on the right quite well, consistently long term, would you be interested in a top pairing of Minchikov and Zellweger if they have good chemistry in like 5 to 10 years?
Hell yes.
Yeah. I am I mean, that reminds me of way back when of doing a Fowler-Vatanen pairing just for the fun.
Yeah, give me that all day.
Yeah. Daniel
Me together on the power play. Should point that out.
Daniel Me asked, who do you guys think is the most overrated player currently in the NHL?
Wow.
Huh.
I've not thought about this in a while.
I have not thought about that in a long time either.
Usually I go with Drew Doughty, but he's had a bit of a career revival. So I don't know if that's true anymore.
Who would be underrated? Or sorry, overrated?
I've had Drew Doughty quite a bit over the years, much to Kings fans' chagrin on Twitter.
Would Ryan O'Reilly at this point be overrated?
No. I mean, he's
probably properly rated.
Yeah, and Drew Doughty's has like great numbers this season.
Yeah,
and so does Ryan O'Reilly. So we're both striking out.
Fair. That's a tough one. Jacob Trouba. Yes, that's a great one from last one left.
Yeah, I just don't like a lot of what he does.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
Yep. Agreed. There was a question. Oh, someone earlier had asked, and I was saving this for now, but perfect. This came in perfect time. Hammock M said, is Gauthier going to be called up to the NHL for a look this year, or is it not possible as he is not signed and Frozen 4 is April 11th through 13th? So this is something I briefly wanted to mention. With Cutter Gauthier, he can sign once his college season's done. So he is for sure going to get at least one game. You're correct. Frozen 4 is April 11th through 13th. So if Boston College does indeed make it to the Frozen 4, he will probably only be playing the final game of the season against the Vegas Golden Knights. But if they do end up losing in the regionals, which is 2 weeks before that, so I think that's April, the national title, I think it's 11th through the 14th was when it was. So the regionals are 28th through 31st. So if Boston College is knocked out in the regionals because they're going to make it and it's all single elimination, then he could sign and play for the Ducks. I would imagine probably about 7 games or so is where it would end up at. So The real question is, are Boston College knocked out prior to the Frozen Four? And it's hockey. It's single elimination. Anything's kind of possible with that.
Yeah. Going back to the overrated question.
Mm-hmm.
So there was an NHL player poll about this.
Yeah, they had Zegras.
Zegras, but then after that, it was Darnell Nurse, which I think is more about the contract.
Yeah.
Matthew
Seth Jones?
Matthew Tkachuk. I don't think
Matthew Tkachuk is not overrated.
Seth Jones is on here, but it's like, I think the players probably just don't like Matthew Tkachuk.
Sorry, I'm just spitballing in some sense of, I think Seth Jones could be someone that's
I'm just going
overrated.
over the results.
Yeah.
Jason Robertson was on here, which I think is kind of wild.
Wild. Very
Jonathan
much disagree
Huberdeau,
with.
I think that's probably fair.
Valid.
Alex Ovechkin is probably fair at this point. The guy that I want to nominate here is Mark Scheifele, because I feel like Mark Scheifele is always thought of as this like great top six forward, and he's like horrendous defensively. Like he is what people think Trevor Zegras is from a statistical standpoint. Yeah.
Wow. So, I had not looked at his Rapham charts before, and
it's it's not like a one-off either. Like this is a trend that holds if you broaden it out. So yeah, Mark Scheifele just never, I feel like the way he's talked about in the mainstream is never like that. So I will go with him.
Yeah. Elizabeth Leo asked, how many points does Zegras have next season, or need to try to shoot for next season?
I think crossing 70 would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I think that's a realistic, but also solid kind of baseline for him.
And she also asked, what kind of production, like how many goals and points does a fourth liner need or should aim for? Didn't we try to piece that together when we were talking on the weekend?
I don't know.
I did it with, I was doing it with in pub chat with Mike, and I think I was looking at like, I was looking at the Carolina Hurricanes, because I'm like, they're a team that kind of gets depth scoring. Where is their kind of roster at in terms of their fourth liners with scoring? Because I'm like, all right, looking at kind of a team and figuring that out. So, looking, their fourth line right now I'm just kind of piecing together their team. Jordan Martinook, I think, is on their fourth line and has 24 points in 64 games.
Yeah, I was going to say like 20 to 30 points.
Yeah.
It's probably like high end.
Yeah, I think that, 30 points is the high end of it, but you want 20 plus, I think.
Yeah, I don't really think about depth players in terms of production. Also, Martinook's on their third line. Just to be clear, Brendan Lemieux is on their fourth line. If you want to look him up.
Well, he has 3 points in 25 games.
What about Jesper Fast?
17 points in 61 games.
Okay, see that sounds kind of like, and then Jesperi Kotkaniemi is their fourth line center right now.
He has 24 points in 64 games.
Are Canes fans still dunking on the Habs over that one? Because it's aging pretty poorly. Just saying. Was not mad when he signed that deal. Was not mad at all.
Yeah, like the issue for the Ducks is the Ducks' fourth line is Bo Grew, who has 2 points in 36 games, Ross Johnston, who has 3 points in 51 games, and then I'm spacing right now hard on who is the winger, Brett Leeson. Leeson has 16 points in 50 games.
See, Leeson's production is more in line with what we were just talking about.
Leeson's the only one close to that.
Yeah, and he's doing that playing with those guys.
Yep.
So.
Yep.
Ugh, so good.
Yep.
It is kind of funny when, like, because we don't really look at points that much, but when you do.
When I looked at this and saw Ross Johnston had 3 points in 51 games, I was like, oh boy.
That was my only. That was my only.
Sam Carrick, FY, 11 points in 61 games, because someone was asking about that.
Yeah, but that was my only gripe with Pat Verbeek's comments, is it's like, well, you signed Ross Johnston.
Yeah.
So you're bottom six.
Well, claimed him.
Or you brought him onto your team willingly. Correct. No one forced you to do that, and you got what you asked for.
Yeah. JK98 said, what would your ideal third and fourth lines look like next season when everyone is presumably healthy?
I was going to cook up something for this because I knew someone was going to ask, and I didn't. But your top line is probably Zegras, Carlson, Gauthier. Let's just go with that.
Sure.
Second line, McTavish, Terry.
And then insert Free agent signing.
Insert Steven Stamkos.
Sure.
How about that? And then your third line would be Vetrano, Strome, Killorn.
Yep.
And then fourth line is just, I mean, put Ben Meyers in there.
Ben Meyers,
Nikita
maybe
Nesterenko and Pavel Rotunda.
Maybe a free agent signing. But the funny thing is it sounds like from Pat Verbeek's comments that he is looking for that modern fourth line.
Yeah.
Like he's looking like there was a point that there was a point
in the top 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a point this past season where the Ducks' best time best fourth line was McGinn, Carrick, Lagesson. It's like I feel like that's the exact type of fourth line that Pat Verbeek wants in terms of how they're going to end up playing.
Yeah, what's interesting is that if you get Natchez, you do have to move some things around if you want to play him on the right side. So you'd have top line of Carlson, Natchez,
Zegras?
Gauthier. Like, because you're not going to put Gauthier with like Ryan Strome, I don't think.
No,
he needs to be next to someone who can make plays.
Sure.
For him.
Yeah, I'm confused, kind of what you're getting at here though, because there's still space if they get Natchez.
No, there is space, but I'm just curious what you do with him because to me he kind of takes that top line spot.
I mean,
like maybe put him with McTavish and Terry.
Yeah, that's what I think you do.
I just really want to see him with Zegras and Carlson.
I mean, those you could do that.
Those are the guys he should be playing with.
You could do that and then have Gauthier on the. Isn't Gauthier a left wing?
He is, yeah.
Yeah, so Gauthier on the left side, Terry's on the right side, McTavish in the middle.
Yeah. I mean, that could work. That's just not what I personally want to see for him, but
yeah,
my own bias.
Yeah. Still, there like it's crazy to think about that the top 6 is like set right now.
Yeah, that's why like I both think that it's true that Pat Verbeek is going to overhaul the bottom 6 while also not really like it won't be a true overhaul because there's only so many spots to fill and change.
The overhaul, I think, also should be put in this perspective that guys that are currently second liners will be third liners. So that production that he's looking for from the bottom 6 will be coming from guys that are currently not in the bottom 6.
If they go out and get another winger, like he said, which we don't know if that'll happen yet, and they bring in Cutter Gauthier into the top 6, like Alex Killorn is just not in the top 6. Which is kind of wild to me.
Like, the fact that the third line is probably the most expensive line for the Ducks.
Not great.
Not great, but, I mean, take advantage of the guys.
It's just not great.
Take advantage of guys on ELCs, I guess. But...
yeah, I don't know if that's maximizing that advantage, but yes.
Yep. Let's see. Yeah, I think that's going to do it for us. Unless you've got anything else.
Shit show?
I don't. Oh, we didn't do shit show last time.
We didn't.
So let's see. Let's see. Get Jones off the PP drum banger said, if LA Lou was a wrestling character, what personality would he adopt? Will he be a babyface or a heel? He is for sure a heel.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Someone in our podcast questions Discord asked, would you trade the Ducks #1 pick this year if it isn't Celebrini? No, I would not.
Probably not.
No.
Let's see. Max Jones Truther said, with the trade deadline season upon us, what were your go-to trades at the lunch table in elementary school?
I feel like chocolate milk was always a hot commodity. If it ran out early, got to get that chocolate milk.
Trading a fruit roll-up was always a good option.
Yeah.
Figuring out things for that type of trade.
Bring that back.
Yeah. Yep. God, fruit roll-ups I have not had a fruit roll-up in forever. But
yeah, I don't really have any desire to.
Having a fruit roll-up is good. I can't wait for Luke to like those so that I can secretly eat them.
Wow.
And then he'll be like, why is the box empty? And it's because I ate all of them in one night. Because, sometimes you just gotta.
Yeah, I had a rare night out on Friday. Can confirm, being up late, out at bars, having drinks, not as fun once you get past a certain age.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a cost than income, I would say.
Yep.
You're like it was like almost, it was like not even midnight yet, and I was just sitting there, and I was like, Man, I'm tired. I'm ready for bed.
Oh, that was me last night when I got home from the game because I was roasting in the sun for 2 hours or so. Shout out Annie OD, who was right in front of me in line, and we just shot the shit for basically an hour and a half. So that was great.
Wow.
Before
Nice.
getting the shoes. So somehow got all of the shoes I wanted.
Yeah, what are your quick hitting thoughts on the Ducks Vans?
Do you want me to show both of them on screen that I got?
Sure. Go
All
ahead.
right.
It's your podcast.
Here are the black ones,
Nice.
and kind of worn now, but there's that.
Yes.
And then
Those are my favorite. The eggplant and jade ones with the Mighty Duck on the back heel.
I was not planning on getting them, but after waiting in line for hours, I was just gonna get the
Some
black
cost
ones.
fallacy?
When I legit,
Cost fallacy?
I was like all dead set on like just getting the black ones, and I got to the front of the line, and I was like, shit, I've waited this long, and panic bought the other ones also because I'm like, am I ever? They're a collector item, is how I'm viewing it. I don't know if I'll ever wear them, but yeah, so
They're cool.
they're really cool. The orange, the only thing I wish is there was a different variety. It wasn't too high tops, but they're really, really cool. I do want to mention this, not a sponsor of the show, but for anyone that is dealing with Vans as you're getting older and they're hurting your feet more and more, because as you get older, that shit happens. I found this insole brand, Feel Your Soul, that's specifically sized for Vans,
Really?
different Vans ones, both authentics and classic, old schools and high tops. And they work really well to make them a lot comfier. So Feel Your Soul. Check
I
it
feel
out.
like that's very telling that someone else has to come up with like an insole just to make
Yeah.
them like bearable.
They have Converse and Vans.
Yeah,
It's breathed new life into them.
I really like how Vans look, but they are just not really wearable without something like that. Like if you're someone who goes on walks or does anything that's like
sure.
beyond just like
They're-
walking to your car.
Yeah. I mean, they have always been my go-to shoe. As I've now gotten older, I start buying the Ultra ranges because those are the most functional ones they
They're
have.
more functional, yeah.
But these insoles make them functional again, though. Austin had a question, actually. Colton White update. How is he doing?
I honestly couldn't tell you more than you probably could find out on your own with just his baseline stats. But let's see. He's got... Oh, Colton White. Why did I think that... Why did I think you saw
Who are you
Ross
thinking
Colton?
of?
I was thinking of Ross Colton.
No.
Colton White is in the AHL.
He is with the goals.
And
he will not be getting called up, and he is a UFA this summer.
yeah, he is just not really in the plans.
Nope.
He's not in the Ver plan.
He's not in the Ver plan. It's a great way to put it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I feel like we've reached the end here.
We have. I'm tired.
Our maiden voyage.
What?
Our plane is landing. Our flight simulator plan is landing.
Are you gonna crash us into the tarmac like you did on your flight simulator streams?
Someone is asking if Luke can skate yet. Update?
I actually emailed Bauer about skates and what sizes they have and what ones to get. And the issue is the smallest skate that they have is still like 3 sizes too big.
And so it begins the journey.
So I have already looked, and they are adjustable though. But he's currently a size 4, and I think they started a size 7. So
the journey of 1,000 miles.
Yeah. So
fantastic.
We'll see. I think the next step for Luke is swimming lessons.
Okay.
I think that's the next athletic endeavor for my son.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good one. Good to know how to swim.
Yeah.
Some people don't learn, and they have to learn later on, and it's a tough one.
Yeah, want to get him in the water, get him water safe, get him out in the ocean, all that fun stuff.
Can Luke fly yet?
I can throw him in the air.
He cannot defy gravity.
He cannot defy gravity. He's not a superhero yet.
Oh, I want to ask you this question. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Is that came from the Verbeek thing, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The invisibility answer was a weird one, I must say.
DJ Jojo asked.
Probably to fly. Ability to fly would be cool.
I would go teleportation, I think.
Teleportation would be good. I think flying
Teleportation or time travel.
teleportation would be like really convenient, but I don't think it would be that like fun, if that makes sense.
I think it'd be really fun.
I think flying
It'd
would
be
be fun.
amazing.
Flying is almost like like being able to teleport, but fun in the process.
What if, like, imagine your daily commute and all the time you waste just sitting
Yeah.
in traffic.
Flying,
And
you
you
get flying, you get that same thing because you're able to fly over everyone
But
and
it's
get there
not
so much quicker.
instantaneous, though.
No,
not-
but you get to enjoy your fly. What if you want to have that little bit of time to decompress? Some
What if
people
you-
need a 10-minute commute.
What if you fly into a flock of birds and get pecked to death? Like, it's cold up there. I don't think people realize that it gets colder as you go up in elevation.
I like how that's where you went with it.
Flying doesn't actually sound that fun.
Flying
I feel like I'd
sounds
just be scared.
fantastic. You can fly. What are you scared of?
Well, it's cold. One.
You can't fall.
Also, the air quality, super low in your area and in mine.
I can't believe these are actual rebuttals to flying.
I mean, how high, like, what's our elevation here? I guess that's my question. Are you trying to fly to Europe?
No, I'm just trying to be able to fly instead of driving.
Like 5,000 feet, we'll call it.
I'm just going to fly to work.
Okay. For some reason, I just got this visual of you flying in the air, like arms
In a
spread.
suit?
Yeah, like over LA traffic, and it just cracked me up.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, exactly.
No, I like my teleportation better. But yeah, I think time travel would be too much of like you're messing with the laws of nature.
Yeah,
That would be a little freaky.
yeah, yep.
Do you want to guess my new beer league team name?
I saw it. Isn't it like pig pancakes or something like that?
Pig Burgers.
Pig burger, sorry.
Thoughts?
Sure.
Dumb.
Very dumb.
Well, the point of this team is to have fun. So you should support it instead of downlifting.
I'm not downlifting. Good for pig burgers. Pig blankets.
Well,
Pigs
if you're
in a
ever in the
blanket.
area, you can sub. So there you go.
If I'm ever in the area.
If you're ever in the area with hockey equipment,
With my gear.
I don't know why that would ever happen.
I would have my gear.
Yeah. All right. Let's get out of here.
Yeah.
If you enjoyed the podcast, there's a great way to support us. Go check out our Patreon page, patreon.com/crashthepond. For $2 a month, you get access to our patrons only Discord server. Ton of fun. Get to connect with other diehard Ducks fans. You can upgrade that to $7.50 per month, and there you get access to 2 bonus podcasts, which actually reminds me we need to schedule our big trade deadline breakdown.
We do.
Where we will talk about every trade that occurred at the deadline, not just the Ducks, which should be wild because there were some wild ones.
Yep. It'll be fun.
And then you also get 2 bonus exclusive player breakdown videos. So go check that out, patreon.com/crashthepond. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Leave us a rating and a review there. You can also subscribe to us on Spotify. Leave us feedback. We really cherish that feedback. It's important to us. We want to give you guys the best product possible. Subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/crashthepond. Great way to support the show. We really like to see you guys get in there with the YouTube clips, the player videos, the podcast itself. Go check that out. Find us on social media. Check out our website, crashthepond.com. So you can support us by getting coffee mugs, stickers, t-shirts, all with our beautiful Crash the Pond logo on it. And on that note, thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Have a good one.
Bye.